So welcome to Theorycraft, a weekly conversation where core PC and console devs, engage with their players in conversation that devs...
Next gen.
Yes, but core at all times. You can train your core every day, actually. It's what you're supposed to do. The devs may include special guests from time to time, but on the reg, that is this esteemed panel of Candace Thomas, Chris Kaleki, myself, Luca Fuzzi, and of course, the apocryphal god, Kevin Jordan, the literal god and metaphorical god already being taken. We had to figure out something else. This is unlucky episode number 13. We lost last week's VOD, so sorry about that. If this sounds more organized than usual, it's because it is. It's because Chris gave us proper show notes this week, like a boss. So we've got like a bunch of different things to ping around. As kind of a soft opener, when last we spoke, Candace's real life post-COVID glow up continues, and she was going to an 80s themed dance party or just a party. What was that about?
There was an 80s cover band, and it was in Huntington Beach, which is known for its fearlessness.
Yes.
Fearlessness when it comes to COVID-19.
It's Baskin Robbins is, among other things.
And so
I won't say what popped in my head.
It was terrifying, but it was nice at the same time. It's a 10,000 square foot patio. And there were tables that were sectioned off so you could order food and sit down, which is really nice. But the band was playing inside, even though the doors were open. But there was a really good speaker system that would pump all the music outdoors. So if you didn't feel like you wanted to expose yourself to a bunch of people, then you could do that. And I found that as a 36-year-old woman being accompanied by a 42-year-old man, that we were among the youngest people there.
Whoa.
Right.
So, and it felt like it was just a bunch of people reliving their high school moments. Like they were all dressed up. Like they were just living their fucking best life.
Wow.
And the dance floor was packed, shoulder to shoulder, super spreader event. I looked in and I was like, that's not for me. And I walked out.
Nice.
It's not there yet. I'm just not there.
Did you get rickrolled at any point?
Yeah. Did they play Rickroll? They had to have, right?
No, but they did play like the guy had an amazing range. He did Aha, he did The Cure, he did all sorts. It was very good music, and it felt normal-ish. It felt nice.
Right.
Sure. Real life is often disappointing. So welcome back to that. We missed Kevin last week because he was in the throes of the second COVID shot. It seems like you're alive. How you feeling?
I'm doing great, actually. It did knock me on my ass, but that was only for a couple days. And since then, for everyone wondering, I've just been real busy with real life stuff. So that's the real reason I've been away.
Okay. Put the rumors to rest then. I don't know what they were, but yeah. there must have been some.
Yeah, exclusive. This is a Theorycraft exclusive. Kevin's all right.
We landed at real life stuff. Chris, what's up in your world? You playing games? You got anything you want to talk about? How's California?
California is super hot today. This whole week is like been like a heat wave, and today I noticed like the fires have already begun in Orange County. One of the roads is blocked off, and they have like 100 firefighters that are fighting some fire. So it's crazy because I think California is having like all these droughts and all these problems.
Yeah.
Right. And I was in NorCal over the weekend, and a lot of my family and friends up there were telling me that it's interesting because like the people in the community in NorCal kind of get annoyed with the SoCal group, because in NorCal they really try to conserve water. It's like part of the culture is like, I remember when I was a kid, like I had to, I would get yelled at if I left the water on while brushing my teeth or whatever, right? But in SoCal, it's like a lot more lax with it. And we actually get all of the water in SoCal from NorCal. And so...
Right.
Yeah. And so they're all talking about turning that off and restricting that or something in SoCal. So SoCal will be fucked if we don't get our water from NorCal. So, and also apparently in NorCal, they're also like, you can't build a swimming pool, like an in-ground one. Like all the contracts are being declined right now. So wild times. We're on our way to Mad Max in California.
Yeah,
I know, right? It's only
And
getting
then
better.
Waterworld.
Yes.
And Waterworld.
Yeah.
I don't know which is worse, Mad Max or Waterworld. I don't know. That's a good question.
We'll see. I did a fair amount of gaming this past week. My off-stream Valheim journey with friends continues. I want to let you know we attempted Bone Mass, and
Nice.
we weren't really. So that's a boss in Valheim, and we thought we were prepared because we were just kind of like kicking the can around, farming iron and just putting it off. So we decided to all ride over there and just basically charge full in on this dude. Got insanely wiped. And then when we went back, he spews poison everywhere. This is minor encounter spoilers, by the way. It's just, it's heavy poison. So bring your meads. We went back. We managed to glitch this boss to the point where he was just pathing around in a circle and not attacking. And we could beat on him like a piñata for 80% of his health, which was like the dream. We were completely fine with killing him this way, actually. And then, predictably, he woke up at the last second and destroyed all of us. And we had also built this really cheeky portal to like right near where he was, figuring, we could just run back and respawn and just keep graveyard zerging him. But once his AI was fully back online, like zoning back through the portal to him, it was like you could hear the combat sounds before you even fucking loaded the zone. And like coming out of the portal, like I don't know if I got fraps of it or not, but it was just like bone mass, just like with one cleave, just knocking out like all of our fucking walls and spewing on it. And it was just like, we need to retreat through this portal and like never return again. Like this land is just, this timeline is completely scorched. So we'll go back and try it again now that we kind of know what's up. There's this weird thing where bosses in Valheim are weak to stuff and like really weak to stuff. And if you don't know that, like you can't do a whole bunch. And we did figure out accidentally what he was weak to, and now we're ready. But yeah, it was a buzzkill.
Nice.
But anyways,
Sounds awesome, though.
It continues. Yeah, we're still playing, so that's all good. I'm getting a little tired of farming, honestly. I think the glow of that is worn off for me, but we'll get through there.
Mm-hmm.
Chopping wood.
Yeah, chopping wood, carrying water. No, it's more just like waiting for the fermenters to finish and just, I don't know. But I don't know, maybe after this we'll have a surge because we'll be like, now we can head to the mountains and we can build a whole new base out of new stuff, and it'll be like, the honeymoon phase again.
Get chased by wolves.
Yes, exactly. The wolves that I've heard so much about from our very first episode. I can finally meet them in real life.
The pacing in Valheim is definitely different. It's inconsistent, which I think is good at times and bad at others. But I like the transition from the starting zone to, the next two zones. But after that, it gets, and that's kind of like depending on the player, right? Like each person hits their threshold at a different time for how much grind is too much.
They can take, and then sometimes, I'm sorry. I was just saying those losses are really traumatic because you're just sprinting back in naked through the swamp repeatedly. You don't even know which corpse is yours anymore. And it's like Draugr with arrows just one-shotting you unseen. And it's like the entire night is just gone after one failed attempt. So sorry, Chris, I'm done venting.
Oh, no, I wasn't going to say. I just what Kevin was saying. I just feel like, honestly, the game, it's an early access game. So you could tell they spent a lot more effort on the earlier zones than the later ones, especially the last biome. What is it called again? I forgot. It's unfinished. It's like
Plains
update.
That's the Mistlands.
Mistlands. Yeah. That one is like not even done at all, but
it's a missed opportunity. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. Let's hope it lands.
I got like some sort of Emerald Dream vibes when I was like running around it. It has some similar elements, and then also, the Emerald Dream was something that was never added really. So,
well, the Emerald Nightmare was. We can maybe talk about that in another episode. We could do Malfurion voice clips. The episode. Okay, so huge news week, obviously. I doubt there's anybody here that hasn't already been buried by the avalanche of E3 content over the last week. But maybe we can just bring up, some of our favorite things that popped us for. Like, Candace, have you tuned in at all?
Oh yeah. Obviously Dark Souls, the George R.R. Martin Dark Souls. Pretty excited to see what that's going to turn out like. It might be one that I could stomach.
Yeah. I hate to be this guy, but when I saw George R.R. Martin, I felt like it went down a little bit in my expectations. I guess that's just still I'm washing out from the end of Game of Thrones and still riding that disappointment. But
I think the brand has kind of suffered. Yeah, you're not wrong.
But the thing is, like, and once again, like our visibility into the process, like, didn't the showrunners at HBO take the reins away from George R. R. Martin so that he could finish the books differently? It could very well be that George R. R. Martin is not responsible for right the ending, and that
Yeah.
he'll actually do well, and the game will be
Right.
better
This is
for
his chance.
my first gut reaction was just like, ugh, they don't need him. Was my first thing. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
the original Dark Souls and the story that they've told is pretty amazing and pretty beloved. And so, do we need, like a really strong Western influence into the
Right.
whole thing?
Can I just say that, like, there will probably be a little girl in the story, and it's going to make me just as uncomfortable as every single Arya chapter of the book.
Jesus.
This is not like an indictment on the man. It's just like, I don't know how many times I need to read about Arya going pee. Like, I get that it was part of the whole like gender situation, but it was just too many times. You know what I'm saying? Just too many times.
Oh, yeah.
And on a lighter note, there's the Pirates of the
can't.
Caribbean Sea of Thieves update, which I'm actually the most excited for. I cannot wait for that week to just get murdered by everybody who wants to try that game again.
Nice.
What's the deal? That's just like
it's
an
free,
expansion
too, I
themed
think,
around
right?
that content.
I mean, basically, they don't have expansions, but it's just like a content pack. It'll have its own features. It'll have whatever. I don't think you pay for it either. It's just another update, but
Okay.
it will have Davy Jones, and it'll have little quests that you do with Captain Jack Sparrow, and it looked like there was a whole new like gameplay loop, which looks really cool. But of course, I mean, it's actually voiced by Johnny Depp and Jeffrey Rush. They spent the big monies, I think.
Oh wow. Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, maybe it wasn't Jeffrey Rush, but it definitely was Johnny Depp. Or at least it was someone who sounds exactly like him. Very excited.
You get PK'd over and over again by XX Kira Knightley XX.
Yep.
Can't wait.
The first 2 weeks are going to be super ratty, I'm sure, but that might be part of the charm, is like seeing what it's like whenever that game is just at its saturation point with people.
Right.
Speaking of Rare, did you guys notice? I don't know if you're following this game, but it's like some really pretty game that Rare is working on. A new one. It's called Everwild. And
Wasn't it
got
absent?
delayed. Sorry, what'd you say?
It was absent from the show. Was the news?
Well, they announced it's been delayed.
Okay.
And for like 2 years or so, they're like rebooting it almost or something.
Hmm.
One of the game director or the game director of the project is the game director of the team left the studio or something. So they put there's a new game director, and I kind of looked up this guy and I was shocked. Like, he's worked in the industry like since 1990, and his IMDb or Moby Games profile is wild. And he was also the game director of Sea of Thieves. So yeah, I'm excited for this game.
Cool. Kevin, have
But
you
yeah, no,
been tuning
there's
in at all?
no.
I missed most of it. The only thing I did see actually was just reactions and videos of the Elden Ring thing, which I'm super excited about. What's going to be interesting for me, again, just the George R. R. Martin thing, is are they going to change the format of like how they tell the story in a Dark Souls type game? Because it's almost exclusively showing, not telling. And so will that format change? Because I think that's like, because I always thought, like, if Blizzard were to do a Dark Souls, and I talk a lot about how the From Software and Blizzard have like the opposite, like polar opposite design philosophies, and yet they both make amazing games back in the day, right? So how would Blizzard tackle a Dark Souls type game? And I think one of the main things is they would do a lot more telling of the story than showing. They'd have a massive tutorial process on teaching you everything on how to do everything, but then they'd also do more telling than showing. And yeah, so that's what I think about when I see like a very Western, writer involved in the next project. Is that's what I wonder about, is are they going to change their philosophy, or is he just going to help create the world concepts but they're still going to rely on showing more than telling?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of imagine that he's not super connected. That he's probably like they're probably sending him like ideas for things. He's
Mhm.
commenting on it, or maybe it
Right.
gives him broad stroke direction or vision, but not really
Mhm.
working on it day to day. I just can't imagine him being, because he mentioned at one point in some interview he was working on like 30 projects or something.
Oh wow.
know,
They're
and
just
so if he's
splashing
doing
his
that,
game
he's just,
everywhere. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. He's a brand now, really.
Yeah, yeah.
It's kind of like when you see all these movies that says Steven Spielberg in huge text.
Mhm.
It's like executive
Sure.
producer, and then the actual director is someone you never heard of.
Right.
You know, it's probably some sort of situation like that.
James
Mhm.
Patterson of yeah. But yeah, if you guys don't know the story like of Dark Souls, one of the things that like the creation of it was the main guy is a kid looking through like a bunch of old picture books of Western stuff like knights and dragons and all that stuff. But he couldn't read English yet. And so he had no idea what was going on in the books. And so he made up his own stories, he made up his own things. And that's so like Dark Souls is kind of an extension of that experience. And I love that from like a creation standpoint, a game design creation standpoint, that the players just kind of step in and they don't understand, and it's not spoon fed to them what's going on. They have to piece it together by looking around, and everything's very visual, and they have to trace kind of things on their own. And they don't have to. They can just play through and treat it like a fun game that's hard to beat. But if they want, there's all that extra stuff that they can explore. And I think that's one of the strengths of that game series. And so that's why I kind of worry about
No,
them moving
totally.
away from it.
Yeah, it's always interesting because I think a lot of games do this, what you're saying, which is more show don't tell sort of thing, where they just pepper in things that are interesting that people think about, and it makes the world feel like it has depth and things like that, right? But then over time, they get more budget, and the sequels, like they can have cinematics, they can have VO, they can have higher fancy voice actors, and they get sort of swept up in that. But then, like you says, it could, like you're saying, it can do a disservice to the game and make it just kind
Yeah.
of, less mysterious, less interesting, less
Right.
deep.
And again, it
So-
takes away that whole process for everyone who's really into that stuff and trying to piece it all together and putting their heads together and comparing notes. And, there's a lot of stuff that, in that process that can be really fun.
Mhm.
I mean, I think that Blizzard really got a handle pretty early on with the show don't tell. Just in WoW Classic, Mancrick's wife. I mean, you stumble into that hut, you find that corpse. You can't write about that. You just have to experience that raw. You know what's happened.
Right.
It's right there.
And you find out it's totally unrelated to Chuck Norris, despite whatever the chat is saying.
Yeah, I guess we never.
This is
got
actually
closure on that.
really. This is we keep stumbling upon topics that I think would be great shows, like talking about show don't tell and talking and a bunch of examples and how to do story
storytelling,
right
yeah.
in games. I
Environmental
think it's a
storytelling
really good
such,
topic.
yeah.
So let's table that one for another show.
Okay, yeah, write it down. We're at 6:19. I mean, we can briefly address this. We talked about the durability system in Breath of the Wild in one of our like really early chats. I think on trying to basically shape the way the players play the game. It might have been one of our episodes with meta in the title, and I feel like we've probably even had more than one by now. I don't know, but yeah, Twitter's exploding with the announcement of weapon durability in Breath of the Wild 2. Chris, do you have a position on this? Do you want to step in?
I think it's a really interesting system design conversation. I know Kevin hasn't. I don't think you've played Breath of the Wild deeply to get this whole problem, but it's really interesting because you can see as a designer all the problems they were trying to solve, and on paper it does sort of address all of them, but in practice it just feels bad for the player. And it's one of these things I'm always thinking about, of like how they could have addressed it. I don't want to linger on this too long because honest, this is a whole other episode you just have just on this whole problem. But yeah, I just kind of wanted to casually mention that again. It just popped up right as Breath of the Wild got announced, and all the game designers on my Twitter were just talking about the durability system, and so it'll be interesting to see what they do for the sequel for sure.
If there's nothing else major from E3, let's just get into the main topic.
Yeah.
So yeah, PvP, designing for PvP. So usually this is where I just kind of hand it off to one of you, whoever came up with the idea, to kind of run with it. But I was I felt like designing PvP is a bit of a broad topic, and we usually want to start out defining, in this case, PvP. PvP for me, I first encountered this term when playing WoW, which was my first MMO, and so I think of PvP as like a reflection of another system that is the PvE aspect of a given game, and I don't think of any type of game where I'm fighting other players, I wouldn't necessarily consider PvP. Like I wouldn't consider, a fighting game PvP or online battlefield, PvP necessarily, because there aren't a lot of online shooters that I've played through campaigns on. And so I don't know that that's like a deep take, but I kind of want to just narrow down on like what we mean when we're talking about designing PvP systems, because I don't think that when you brought this up, you meant talking about first person shooter balance necessarily. And you might mean something MMO specific, but where do you all think we'd land on this agreed upon definition of player versus player? Do we want to stick to MMOs or?
I mean, I think like you said, it is a broad topic, and maybe it's a little too broad. But I think there's a lot. I think PvP in games is really interesting in general. Of course, all the Blizzard games really had PvP as a core sort of pillar or part of the game, and WoW was a game that really in the beginning didn't really have a focus on PvP, but it was something that was kind of championed by, it depends who you ask, but Adham or whatever, adding it to the game. And if you look at the landscape today, all the most popular kind of types of games are PvP games, like whether it's Fortnite, League of Legends, all these games as service games are usually have a large PvP bent. And I think there's so many interesting things with PvP. Like one thing is, this is a very esoteric tidbit, but it's always interesting to me how worked up people get about, like, say, bots in a PvP game.
Mm-hmm.
When players are playing against other people, let's say, it's exciting when they know it's another person. But once they find out it's a bot, people usually get repulsed by that, and they get upset. And like, what is the root of that? I always think about, like, why is it that a bot people just don't like playing against, but they like playing against another person? It's kind of an interesting kind of like a human sort of thing. But yeah, I just think the future and the present is PvP games are on the rise, and how do you make a good PvP experience? What is a good PvP experience? And especially think about Burning Crusade. Been hearing my guild level up, and they log in and they get ganked, and they're all upset about that. But then they like band together and fly out, and then fast forward a couple hours, and they've just been world PvPing and in Zangarmarsh or whatever, right? And
so, if it's becoming more important and more popular over time, then stands to reason there's more attention on it. That the notion of PvP and like the skills around developing it are probably evolving. And by the way, like any of you, just jump in to answer whatever you want here. But can you point to some things that have changed within PvP, kind of globally, or are trending in a direction of the last 20 years of online competitive play? And maybe why would that kind of be happening?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think it has. I think it's come full circle, actually, in a lot of respects. Maybe not full circle, but I think after Ultima Online, there was a pretty strong sentiment that PvP was bad. PvP was synonymous with grief, and I know that it was kind of true with a lot of the WoW team at the time. I came out of Ultima Online with this is the greatest thing ever. And so I pushed to answer your question, Chris, I pushed for PvP. And I want to say that I had a very strong hand in convincing Alan Adham how important it was.
Mm-hmm.
Because before that, WoW was not going to be a PvP game. It was going to be like EverQuest, where there might have been one server or something that was, free for all. But otherwise, it was going to be weren't going to be factions. Everyone could group with everyone. So I moved to try to get it included. And the way we did it, of course, was very different than how Ultima Online had done it. And so I'd like to say that, based on people's experience in WoW with World PvP, PvP servers, even just Battlegrounds on PvE servers, that people got more accustomed to the idea that PvP and the right executions could be really fun.
Mhm.
And so the appetite for it sort of grew, and people got, more okay with it. Like after Ultima Online, just about every game was PvE, or I should say sort of consensual PvP only. Very few games were going to try to do the UO style. And those that tried to do that, like Shadowbane, were very, very hard nosed in their like PR campaigns with us, which was just like, this is for hardcore, PvPers only. And so all the people that kind of all the players that felt like PvP was bad steered really well clear of that kind of game. And so it's kind of gone through, I feel like, these waves of no one knew what it was, then they experienced it in many cases against their will in Ultima Online, came out of it with PvP's bad, because this one implementation is the only possible implementation. And then they stayed away from those experiences completely. And then WoW came along and did some different things. I should also credit Warhammer Online and Dark Age of Camelot, because they also had some pretty cool PvP systems that a lot of people had a lot of fun in, realizing that there were alternate systems that could lead to fun PvP experiences. And so over time, yeah, people got more accustomed to them being good. And now I think we're in a place where it's kind of more people are hoping for it, right? Like the market has grown and people are like excited about the prospect, and that's what they're looking for now when they think about the next game. Okay, well, how does the PvP fit in to this game?
Yeah, but it's interesting. Like, do you think when they ask that question, they're talking about how does the instanced consensual PvP happen in that game? Because to me, it feels like I guess I'd never really even thought about the fact that the key PvP PvE server split back in the day in WoW must have been done basically coming off of everybody's bad experiences with Ultima Online and realize, or their formative experiences, and realizing not everybody might want this, right? Because it's not like playing on a PvE server means you can't do literally everything else involving PvP, including at this point, I think if you turn on war mode on a PvE server, well, first off, they don't exist anymore. They were merged when the war mode happened. So it has dissolved, but it's, I don't know. I maybe I'm not looking at the right games, but I don't feel like that organic PvP, the kind of which you were trying to filter for early on. Do you feel like that's become a lot more popular? I guess games like Rust and such are kind of examples of that.
Yeah.
Like when people are warming to PvP, it's in situations like those,
Yeah, I think the appetite, I think where I put the appetite is eyes are bigger than stomach at the moment. Like, I think there's a lot of people that will say, oh, I really want a PvP experience. I really want open world PvP. But when they actually get into it, then they realize it's really not for them, and they get pretty upset. And I think the whole like purge meta is a great example of this, because world buffs being purged is exactly the kind of thing that is, synonymous with non-consensual PvP, right? There's going to be times frequently when things that you really care about are deprived of you because there's enemy combatants on the field that want to take things away from you. And so a lot of people just can't put up with that. They can't handle it. They hate it. And they don't realize that's, part of the package of, non-consensual or world PvP. So I think there's a lot of people that went to PvP servers thinking in their mind, oh, I'm going to get, me and my guild are going to race to clearing everything. I'm going to be dual wielding, Hand of Ragnarok, wrecking everybody, and, just bathing in the blood of my enemies, right? And then they get in there and it's like, oh shit, there's actually a lot of people that play the game way more than me and are better than me. And this isn't working out how I expected. And so it loses its luster, right? And then they're like, I think I'll just go to a PvE server now.
Yeah, I mean,
where
that's
they can just do
psychology.
battlegrounds for rewards, yada yada.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, world PvP is a whole other interesting topic because, I designed this feature for WoW War Mode, which was kind of a way to address the PvE, PvP server situation, and also sharding and also faction balance with the game. It had a lot of things it was trying to tackle. But what was always interesting to me about World PvP is that people like the idea of it and they like being in a game that has it and things like that. But then in practice, they kind of have some expectation that if World PvP does occur, that it's a good experience, and by good experience, it means it's fair. I didn't get ganked. I came into an encounter. It felt fair. No one jumped in and healed the guy or whatever. Right? Yeah. Which is never really the vision. Which was never really the vision, the original design of it. Right? It's World PvP. It's sort of the Wild West by design, and it's unpredictable. Anything could happen. Right?
Yeah.
And I think that it was always kind of surprising to me that the community just has trouble kind of accepting that, which was always kind of really the thrill to me with WoW originally. Of course, there was no sort of faction balance on most of the servers, and it was hardly ever fair or anything like that. But it was still fun and interesting, and a lot of my memories from WoW were random World PvP engagements. Like there was this one situation where in one zone, I think it was in Moonglade, there was like a wedding between a Horde player and a Alliance player. And some Horde guild came in and uninvited and killed everybody. And mind controlled the Alliance bride and married it to somebody on the Horde side or whatever. So, like all these things adding to the story of the game, adding to the depth, making it memorable, creating stories. And that's kind of really the power of PvP, which is inherently has to do with just people, right?
Yeah. I always think about the full experience of PvP. I have a full PvE experience and the full PvP experience. For me, the full PvP experience is it starts with a gank, right? Like you get ganked, you get punished, you're shocked and pissed off and angry, and then from there you relax, you settle down, you come down from that, and then you're committed to getting revenge. And then you go out and you serve that dish extra cold, right? And then you feel glorious, right? And that's the full experience. But it's sometimes difficult for people to get to the end of that experience, and a lot of people opt out after the beginning of the experience, and that just settles in their mind of, well, PvP is just bad because all you do is get ganked and it prevents you from doing your PvE things. But for me, the full emotional experience starts with you getting your ass kicked, you getting your ass handed to you in a way that you did not expect or was unfair or whatever it is.
I think you're saying that full emotional experience is like worth hanging on to, because it reminds me of Chris mentioning people feeling like the gameplay is not as enjoyable once the curtain comes up and they realize they've been playing against bots, And I think it's because they crave the emotional experience that is knowing that they affected another person, that there was some kind of act or intention communicated, between the two of them. And it strikes me that the entire Purge meta is basically just the modern WoW min-maxed solution to how to trigger another person and know you've had the maximum effect with the least effort possible. Is just don't even have to kill them, just remove their buffs. Like waste as much time as of theirs with as little time of yours as you can. It's pushing Purge. It's so good.
Yeah. Which is why I kind of didn't like PvE servers, because you could sort of grief people by stealing their taps and things like that. And you couldn't do anything about it because you couldn't kill them, right? And so in some ways that was more toxic experience than PvP servers.
That's a social element and an emotional element for why I think PvP is good in games, because it gives you that outlet to compete more directly, but also that energy has to go somewhere, right? Like that, the frustration of being interfered with by other people in games, it builds up in you, and I feel like it has to go somewhere, and it's either going to go into PvP channels, or it's going to go into social channels, or player towards company channels.
Mm.
And I'd much rather people, exercise that and, expend that emotion in PvP and other gameplay modes than, reporting or going to Reddit and, like things like that are sort of outside the game experience. So yeah, giving them a place to channel that. And of course, the end might be, well, now I'm even more frustrated because I tried to channel it in that way. And now I'm just being deprived of even more because I've lost that battle. But there's ways out of that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have to process things to really, metabolize them and move through them healthily. I think being able to respond in kind is probably, like, it sounds like that's what you're saying, let the person have that same avenue or else it's just going to get negative elsewhere. Candace, I wanted to kind of throw to you because we were talking about designing for PvP overall, and you obviously can't say anything, but you're in the position right now to be working on something fresh, and you might have to, I presume you're going to have to think about, architecting a PvP system if it's something that's involved from like the ground up. So you don't have to say that you are, but like if you were, what are the kinds of things that you're trying to solve for, you're trying to create in building a PvP system, apart from like just things should be balanced? You know what I mean? Like what kind of texture are you sort of looking to encourage, and like how would you start with something like this?
Theoretically, of course.
Yeah, I'm not touching that one with a goddamn 10-foot pole. However,
okay.
As a content designer, I can say that the combat systems for PvP and PvE are very different. Example, like CC is something that you'll want to have like a diminishing return on, which maybe in PvE you won't want that. In PvE, you want like different healing systems. You want different coordination systems, things like staggering in Final Fantasy 13, or just like interrupt rotation, stuff like that. Stuff that doesn't. I guess interrupt rotations do exist in PvP, but I just feel like the two systems are very, very different, and so you kind of have to reconcile those every step of the way.
Yeah.
Like Chris, can you think of some major changes you had to make to like World of Warcraft abilities because PvP existed and it was either overpowered in PvE or not, or underwhelming in PvE?
Yeah, all the time. I mean, that is a daily stressful thing for the class team to have to think about, and there's a lot there too. It's just like when designing something, it's best to think about it and what's happening at all aspects of the game, like not just PvE and PvP generally, but also like solo and a dungeon. Are they is a primary button on their bar, or all these things. And yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. And I remember one time, I can't remember. I mean, in D3 they talked about doing PvP at one point, and the idea was just like, oh, we're not going to try to balance it all. There's no sort of PvP wags the tail on PvE, and so we're going to have an arena, and people just go in an arena and they fight, and people could potentially be one shot by one ability from the wizard, and that's okay because it's supposed to be hectic or whatever. And I think they ultimately didn't go with that because it kind of really wasn't a good experience, but it kind of highlights kind of the challenge of trying to design for two games in one.
Yeah, the context is very different. Like polymorph is a good example. In the PvE game, it's 60 seconds duration. In PvP, that would be fucking insanity and terrible.
Yeah, I think the thing that frequently gets mentioned by designers is that the monsters won't complain, right? So you can do a lot worse things. But I, for one, had access to the monster complaining forum, and let me not tell you, it got nasty in there a lot of times. So
yeah, scandalous.
Sure, it's like I think I tweeted this. I think it's my pinned tweet, but it's like when you're making encounters, it's like you're playing blackjack, right? You want to tune them just so that you don't go over. And by going over, I mean like they would be too difficult, and then people can't win. But you also don't want to play your card so that you're only playing like a 9, right? Because then it's too easy, and then people don't feel like it's a challenge.
Right.
Which is kind of like, so from a content design perspective, PvP is just sort of like this free content system that a PvE person would have to like make monsters and spawn them and script them and do all the stuff, but like, and then they'd have to decide when the PvP or the content happens and narratively why it happens. But nobody sort of cares in a PvP game, like narratively, why is somebody attacking me? as opposed to a PvE game where it's like, where'd this monster come from? Who are they in the story? It's like none of that actually matters. In Fortnite, you can just be like a llama fighting someone and everybody's just fine with it. So like PvP is great because it's free, highly emotional, highly satisfying content, and you don't have to really like support it. You just have to balance it. You don't have to keep adding shit to it. It stays evergreen pretty well.
There's one part of that I don't agree with, which is the story of PvP, because I'm an orc and they're a disgusting, filthy gnome and they need to be cleansed. So clearly,
Sure, in
Fair.
World of Warcraft, sure, but in a game like League of Legends, like, well, I'm a puppet and you're a cryo phoenix.
oh right,
We're gonna fight because we're
Right.
in the Summoners Rift, right? Like,
Yeah.
No,
or-
very true though. And the important thing I'd add to that is that PvP for games is also way more replayable than PvE typically, without pretty tough grinds attached to
like
the
obviously
systems.
people care about power disparity. That's why you need things like ELO and MMR. But people are
Mhm.
much more forgiving for like an imbalanced encounter with PvP. Like, oh, this guy owned me, but I survived for a couple seconds, so I felt pretty good about it. If a monster walked up and did that to you, you'd probably be like, why is this monster here? Like, you'd pick it apart narratively, you would pick it
Mhm.
apart like emotionally, you would wonder like, how was I supposed to know that guy was like that hard? Whereas like someone
Right.
rolls up in PvP and they smash your face and you're like, well, I guess it looks like they had a Thunder Fury, so I should have known
Yeah.
that.
That's an interesting point. Like, where does the blame go? When you're fighting PvE, the blame goes to the designers, and when you're fighting PvP, it goes to the other players.
And
And then
designers.
sometimes the designers, past that, it's to the designers again. But yeah, they don't blame the monsters, basically. It's not your
Yeah.
fault that you're
And
one-shotting me.
and the joy comes from the chaos in PvP. Like, when could it
Mhm.
happen? There's a Terran mill
And the
popping off right
uncertainty,
now. Yeah. Whereas like that kind of uncertainty, I can't think of a game that has like a PvP or PvE or a narrative focus that thrives on that kind of chaos.
Right.
Like
Never-
maybe
yeah.
Rifts in Diablo, where it's like it's fun because sometimes you get the teddy bears, or you never know where you're going to
Yeah.
be. But like,
But it feels so cosmetic, though. Like, mechanically, it's typically not. Especially if you're doing like a million runs
actually, I
of said
take that-
content.
I take that back. The director in Left 4 Dead is like the most amazing chaos PvE
Oh, yeah.
generator. And
Yeah.
it creates
That's a great example.
hundreds, if not thousands of hours of replayable content
Mhm.
on the same maps with the same characters.
Yep.
Just you're getting from point A to point B and it's in 3 acts. And so there's like just enough narrative. And like the narrative is, of course, like it's zombies, kill zombies. You're never going to feel weird about
Mhm.
killing zombies. But because there is chaos, because you can never, it's not a scripted experience. It's kind of like
Mhm.
reacting to you. So yeah, I take back everything I said about players having a different appetite.
I'll just cut
But
it out
yeah,
of the recording. It's fine.
It would be interesting
It
to
never happens.
to look at those two experiences side by side and figure out why it's so great in one game and not great in another.
Yeah, like looking at it from the lens of what makes a game fun when it's different every playthrough, as opposed to like
Mhm.
why wouldn't you want a WoW dungeon to be different every playthrough? And
Yeah.
really like hyper focusing on those things. And if you have any ideas, go ahead and throw them in. Like, why would it suck every time? If you played a WoW dungeon and you couldn't expect what the pulls were.
Yeah, I feel like this is the direction most games are going now, though, where they want to have like events and randomness in terms of like what's going on, and every time you log in, it's a different experience. Even if it's a PvE game. And so I think a lot of that is coming from sort of the tastes of PvP games, because it is inherently different each match usually. Because you're playing
Exactly.
against
That's
totally
because they
different
want
person.
to replace all of your jobs with AI. That's why.
Yeah.
Oh, I was
feel
so
like
going
that's,
to go there. Like,
I think that's
they
more of a
just want
stretch your
procedurally
dollar
generated.
approach. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They just don't want to have to make, 500 different, Diablo 3 maps themselves. But I don't know that they're seeking the same higher highs, lower lows from the unexpected interactions that come from PvP. I think it's just kind of like, we already got these assets. What if we just remix them a million times? Like, the kids will never stop logging on. It's like, but just like poor multiplayer, bolt-on multiplayer. I remember for a long time gaming growing up, it felt like there were so many forced multiplayer modes that just existed in games that, like, did not need to be there, and you were always like, oh my god, why are the devs even working on multiplayer? You know, like it's sucking resources away, or they were farming it out. And I think it's super easy, and this is another potential topic, but just as easy to screw up, procedural content and remixing stuff and reusing assets if you don't have that intention going into it. Just like with a multiplayer mode, like with D3 in this example, if they had just kind of left it as is, it sounds like it would have just been hellish, and no one would have dealt with it. So you do need to put the barest of kind of thought into it, but I don't know. Is the bar, like, is the waterline high enough now that do games still ship with just like completely abysmal, unattended to PvP? And if they do, like, can that really tank a game that's got something else sort of going for it? I mean, if all you have is PvP and your PvP sucks, you're done.
Right.
But can a bad PvP mode stain something?
I don't think it'll tank it. But yeah, it's just sad that I get disenchanted when I see things added that aren't given the full attention that they deserve and that people want. Yeah, bolting on stuff, as you mentioned, it usually frustrates me quite a bit.
I would say the PvP in Final Fantasy XIV is pretty unchecked. It's structured, but like they don't. Maybe they make class changes because of it, but I think they just like went into it with a good enough blanket design that they don't have to continually like modify their classes for PvP. Right. And it's such a sanitized game mode that it kind of is less relevant. I keep thinking back to like why people care about. Why is it that Left 4 Dead feels good because it's different every time, but Dungeons wouldn't? And I keep thinking back, like, one, it's the reward. So, like, if sometimes you have to work harder for the same reward, then that feels bad. And you don't play Left 4 Dead for the reward; you play it for the experience.
Yeah.
And so, like, that's pretty huge.
And I think that's a tug of war with players. But yeah, finish your comment.
Oh, for sure. And I was just going to say, I also tried to blame it on the fact that you have more of a propensity to pug in World of Warcraft than you do Left 4 Dead. But I'm actually not sure if that's true. Like, just because you're not provided with an endless amount of strangers to play with, like you would be in, let's say, a dungeon queue in World of Warcraft, I still feel like Left 4 Dead is kind of one of those games where you kind of have a pickup group in real life. You don't care how good your friend is. You're like, do you want to play some Left 4 Dead? Do you have the game too? Fuck yeah, let's play it. And so, like, it's kind of the real life equivalent to that. And
him sucking is also part of the fun, right?
Yeah, and you can kind of trust that you'll still have a fun experience because you're doing it kind of for the experience. Even if you bring someone who kind of isn't good. But if you could guarantee that kind of thing in World of Warcraft because there's a reward, like, okay, then the meta game becomes like find the noobliest noob that just AFKs the whole time or something, and it'd be hard to make a director experience unless, of course, you did things like scaling the reward. But then there's all that uncertainty when you hit that button, like, what is my experience going to be like, and what is my reward going to be like? And I wonder if there is like an appetite for that somewhere that is
so funny,
underserved.
The whole time you're talking about Left 4 Dead, I keep thinking about Vermintide, which is made by the same studio.
Hell yes, I played Vermintide. It's fucking amazing.
Right, but like the experiences of like, because they've added reward systems, like you go up levels and you have cosmetics you're chasing. There's items that you're chasing, right? And the pug experience to me in that game versus Left 4 Dead, it feels like it's night and day. The pug experience, I think, is terrible in Vermintide. It's super fun when you play with your friends, but it's terrible when you pug because everyone's racing to get through it and also straight to all the little secrets, which means it gets spoiled for you, right? Like, and stop me with this when this is starting to sound like wow, right? But yeah, like in general, it just shifts instantly from Left 4 Dead, which is people are playing for the experience, to people are playing for the rewards. And so, and then in pugs, that puts a whole other social pressure on, like, like what happens if two different groups are in the same place, like I'm here for the experience and everyone else is there for the reward. And it's like, that's oil and water, it just doesn't mix. And it's really interesting.
And it's not to say that, oh, sorry.
No, just to say like how much I wanted to enjoy Vermintide like I did Left 4 Dead, but had trouble, especially in the pug environment.
Yeah, a lot of stuff was unclear in that game. It's hard to understand like what you should be doing, and the classes are kind of not easy to read. And the I think the monsters are scripted, and or I don't think there's like the director at least is not like it felt very samey to me. The runs,
Yeah, they
Vermintide.
do. They do like when does the big boss show up? But they also, I felt like it was more based on what you were doing, like how long you were taking and stuff like that.
Yeah,
And
the
I
power
haven't,
ups and the ammo replen is different each time, which makes it different.
yeah, and I'm not sure what changes they made from Left 4 Dead to Vermintide, but and just the other comment I was going to make is there's always the tug of war between designer and player because player wants to get the reward as soon as possible, and so things like randomness, like they'll shortcut challenge in order to get the reward,
Yeah.
or shortchange, I should say, their own experience in order to get the reward faster. And so the designer has to be really committed to depriving them by forcing them to enjoy the experience, if you will.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you can see why like the players are always going to hate you for putting in random stuff or things that vary the experience because that means they have to be on their toes every time. And when they're having to do it 100 times because they think there's a reward at the end of it, it's again that tug of war between the different emotions rather than this is a thing you can do 100 times. It's a thing you have to do 100 times.
Sounds like islands.
There's
I
there's
just want
kind
to
of a
real quick
weirdness
let
to that.
people raise their hand if they want to come up, just because we're at 5-ish minutes to 7, and Candace, go right ahead. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. No, I was just going to say that there's kind of like a weirdness to that too, where the player actually in a game like World of Warcraft does want an experiential game as well, even though they also want rewards. So those things kind of conflict. But what I mean to say by that is like the player wants to have something that is optional for them to do that they feel like they can opt into, even though everything in the game is going to have a reward because it's a reward based game. Because if you only have systems that are all elegantly tied together in the end game, and this is a common criticism of Shadowlands, right? They have the Torghast, they have the Maw, they have the raid and everything, and those things are so tightly intertwined that like you have to do one and then the other and then the other, and you're playing this like whack-a-mole. But then there's like not enough stuff for you to do outside of that that makes you feel like you have some agency over what you're doing, and so the game feels too large because you can eyeball all the stuff that you have to do in Torghast and the Maw, and you just feel like, wow, that's going to be a lot of time, and so the game feels like the 1,000-yard stare.
Yeah.
But then also because there wasn't enough to do that felt optional. Now suddenly, like the game feels smaller because there's the only thing you can do is this one thing that you kind of don't want to do, you know. And so I was going to say that having randomness in elements of the experiential stuff that WoW could offer, or that like an MMO or like a large game could offer, is still really important. But it's almost like you have to not design it for the reward. You have to just have it be there and accept that 90% of your players won't do it. But it's still important for it to be there so they feel like they could do it. Like
for sure.
pet battles or, archaeology or
even just a whole dungeon. That's just for the experience.
Yeah.
That'd be an interesting experiment. Of course, no content, creating producer, whatever's okay, that idea. But
I think that was a good observation, Candace, that you said, which is basically, lack of choice or agency in the game makes it feel smaller. Which is interesting to think about. Sorry, Luca.
No,
we were talking about PvP, right?
We were talking about PvP. Yeah. Well, I was going to bring it back to that because you all started talking about rewards and choice and whatever. And I remember, besides vanilla, the time when I most heavily engaged in PvP was in 8.1 with BFA and the addition of the faction incursions. And I think that was not only because I was just riding high in world PvP and war mode felt fun, but because there were like fun long-term goals to work towards, like earning 1,000 honor in every zone got you a mount and a title. It was just one of those super long grinds, but to me, way more fun and preferable to doing than like the one I did for the Crab Mountain Nazjatar, which is literally 90 days of consecutive dailies. It was way more fun to just like blow people off cliffs 1,000 times. And Chris, I thought you had achieved like a really nice way of bringing focus back to open world PvP and that kind of semi-consensual like player engagement sort of stuff by basically stacking war mode with the experience gains and the additional abilities that were coming with that on top of these POIs. And if we had to do like a lightning round, I would just kind of ask you what like the hardest thing about doing war mode is, or what your favorite thing about designing war mode was.
Again, I think the biggest challenge with it is not even so much implementation or design. It's just really sort of managing expectations with the player. Because it never really matters what your design is, but it just kind of matters kind of what the perception it is with players. And again, a lot of it comes down to I remember so kind of how war mode sort of works is like if it tries to bring board and alliance together in a zone, so that there's kind of a somewhat of a fair ratio, like say, I don't know, 20 horde, 20 alliance in some zone, right? And so even when those conditions are exact, like there's 20 horde, 20 alliance, there may be some who are gathering herbs, there may be some who are grinding, and there may be some who are running around trying to gank players or something, let's say. And so even when it is somewhat equal, it doesn't feel equal because some may be like, doing random things off in some corner, or most of the horde may be in the southern part, and most of the alliance are in the northern part, and the southern alliance guy gets ganked and feels like, what the hell? Why is there so many horde here, right? And the thing is, like, you just get pushed in a corner when you're trying to design for that experience because, again, it's just a philosophical thing. It's like world PvP is not really supposed to be completely fair, And and I kind of realized that through the years, I think players kind of what Kevin was saying, they're kind of let's say the stomach for that sort of experience has changed. Whether or not it's the same players or new players or whatever it is, and you could try to think about why that is. Maybe it's just because there's so many sort of arena sort of games out there, League of Legends or Call of Duty or whatever game where you join and it's match made. It has X number of players on each side. Usually the map is mirrored, so that feels like fair, right? And it has MMR, and so players' expectations with PvP now is totally different than Ultima Online or WoW Classics PvP or anything like that.
I mean, aren't they setting their own expectations in a way, though? By the thing I liked about war mode, even versus traditional rolling on a PvP server, is that there was this kind of implicit risk and consent. Like, if you didn't want to get ganked, you could just not turn war mode on. Like, every single person in war mode had that choice now. And so
yeah.
I felt like with every battle I engaged, no matter if they were fair or unfair, if I got ganked, I felt like, well, I mean, I kind of brought this on myself, or I can't feel too bad about that person because they could just not be in war mode, right? I think that really did a lot to allow those consequences in there, but let players kind of manage their own level of involvement.
Yeah, and I would say, the other part of your question was like the thing I liked the most about it. Well, one thing I really liked was designing this bounty hunter system where once players gank a number of players in the zone, they become marked on the main map. And so players can go and chase them down and try to kill them. And if they do, they could get some currency that drops from them. That's just kind of a loot table, player loot table sort of thing.
Love
and
it.
And it was essentially, it was funny because a lot of players' reaction was, we want more of this. There should be more reasons to be a bounty, like be a bounty hunted player. Like there needs to be more depth there. I should be able to get more achievements or get buffs or be able to farm different tokens when I'm the bounty guy. But that never really was the intention. The kind of the design of it was to kind of naturally, you want to have PvP, you want to have an area where people are ganking, but sometimes there's this one rogue in the zone who's just making everybody's lives miserable, right? And so the system was kind of designed naturally to kind of fight that type of experience or that situation. It's kind of self-moderated, right? So if you want to kill a lot of players, you can, but then now it becomes, a little harder, and now players can kind of come find you, kill you, and then maybe you go do something else, right?
Yeah, it's interesting, but it also at the same time promotes that chase for the prestige, because you want to be that rogue that gets his name on the billboard, right?
Yeah, and I did play with it a little bit. Like there's some achievements where if you kill 10 players without dying as a bounty hunter target, like they already know you're there, they're already chasing you. If you could kill 10 players with that, then you get some achievement.
I like it. Yeah.
So I played with it a little bit, but I didn't want to encourage, bounty hunted, or sorry, assassins all over the world, too much.
Mhm.
So it was a delicate balance, but it was a fun problem, fun design
Yeah,
to work
yeah.
on.
I will say too, just my observation with like the release of TBC on PvP servers, just to kind of comment on PvP players wanting it to be fair. I feel like most players, even if they won't admit it, want it to be unfair in their
Yes.
favor rather
Yes.
than actual fairness because they want to win, right? So
Yes.
I think about like the release of TBC, the portal opens up. How many people, like what percentage of people on PvP servers are like, oh, I'm really excited for World PvP. I'm just going to cruise around and I'm going to fight people and it's going to be a blast versus the percentage of people that are like, I'm going to zip to the quest givers and I'm going to race to the instances and I'm going to hide in there until I'm level 70 and have all the best gear. And then I'll start thinking about World PvP, right? Because the expectation again there is that I'm going to be able to dominate in an unfair fashion on a bunch of noobs that were sitting around at the beginning looking for World PvP to engage in rather than beelining to the top of the power chart.
Yeah.
I think that world PvP mattered a lot more whenever there was a scarcity of resources as well. Like if you were running up to a mithril vein and you really wanted it on a PvP server and some alliance fuck comes up, you could kill him and take it, and that was
Yep.
cool. And
Yep.
that was the reason that you would want to pepper in those world PvP experiences between your
Yeah.
PvE grind or your thing to max level, or that's the whole reason that that's the time that you engage in PvP other than getting to max level and then going and poning noobs, right?
It's so funny that you mentioned that specifically because one of my mods named his character on the PvP server Fade Leaf, his rogue. So he could specifically gank somebody going for Fade Leaf.
You know what
Oh,
they're
that's
about.
incredible.
That's so good. Kruger, welcome up to the stage. Have you got a question for us?
Yeah, I have a question. First of all, thank you all for this podcast. It's quite interesting. And my question would be, I think I asked this in Kevin's Twitch chat one time, but I would like to hear all of your others as well opinion on this. What would you think, for example, of an idea where, like, you have in retail WoW, you have the Brawlers Guild, which is like a PvP real-time arena where you can watch others fight some harder PvP mobs, PvE mobs, pardon me. But what would you think of, for example, a PvP arena where you could watch two teams fight in an arena, and you could have, for example, as you have in Strangleton each Sunday, I think, the fishing event, you could have some events in that arena, for example, once a week or something, where you could sign up with your team, and if you win the whole thing, you will get some rewards as well.
Oh man, I'll tackle that one first. As a PvE content designer, I think that what you described is the pinnacle of cool player created shit, right? Especially if you didn't even give them a reward. If you let people, or if you just gave them the system to sign up for like teams and then have the teams face off and no one else could attack them or whatever. I think you'd see a lot of people engaging in that just because they wanted to, like two guilds that are like the best guilds on the server doing like a rumble night, and they could make their own rewards, right? They could say, winner loses 1 to 1 million gold or something, just like rolling off or whatever. And those are super, super cool stories. Though I think the game has to really lend itself to that, or at least the content needs to. Like watching WoW Arena is super exciting, but what they have to do to make that exciting is like make a UI and have commentators that are explaining what's going on to you. There's not a lot of clarity in like who is that person casting Shadow Bolt on, and what are their cooldowns like? Like that's all the stuff that you care about when you watch a PvP event like that. And so they'd have to put in some sort of like they just have to make like WoW PvP into a more spectator sport while in the client and not in like a sanitized tournament environment. Pass the torch to someone else now.
Yeah, I saw Chris just
I
linked
just
the
wanted
Duelers
to comment
Guild.
that I linked Duelers Guild because this is very similar to what your sort of idea is, Kruger. Except I think with Duelers Guild, the challenge with it was the general idea was that it was an arena in the real world. There was one in Mugambala and one in Hook Point in Battle for Azeroth. where players can go and they talk to a guard there, and it sets them up for a match, makes them with a duel in the arena, and people could watch. And it puts you into a different sort of state where other players can't kill you while you're in this duel. And it was cool and novel and things like that. I think the challenge with it was it didn't get a lot of participation because the rewards weren't that great, and then also it wasn't cross realm flagged. So if you're there, it was only people on your immediate server, which usually wasn't. It didn't really have a lot of traffic there. But I think the spirit of the idea is really good. I don't think they've yet had a feature that really was emblematic of what you're talking about.
Yeah, so you're imagining like if a chest spawned every night at 7 p.m. and the last team standing would get it, and the chest could have something amazing like from the black market auction house, for example. That would be something that would drive engagement. And of course, if it was like cross realm or not cross realm, but at least like had smart selection. Like maybe even if you could see who was signed up for the week and you could decide like, oh, there's only 5 guilds signed up. There's a good chance that I get something crazy. There's a good chance I get TB's Blazing Longsword or some shit.
Yeah, exactly. I just think it needed more production budget, essentially, right? And you know how it is. Usually there's way more good ideas than there is budget to do them. And so this was one that we implemented cheaply. It didn't take a lot of time to build, but I think the idea was great. It needed a little bit more to really be more of a flag or, a bigger feature, I guess.
Okay, thank you all.
Oh, yeah. Thanks, Kruger.
Good question, though.
Yeah, thank you all. Keep up the good work.
Great. It looks like Druid has got their hand up. Welcome to the stage. What have you got to say?
It's working?
Yep.
Yeah.
It is.
Okay. So this is something that I've thought about really for a couple of years now, and just try to come up with solutions in my head for how to tackle it. It's been a slow progress. And that is, first, it seems like most of the discussion is really focused around PvP and MMOs, and most specifically like WoW and games like WoW. And I wonder how many other games that don't fit this description, but also have some sort of PvP, have the same sorts of issues that you're talking about. And it is WoW's combat-oriented design not largely responsible for some of the issues that World PvP has, and would balancing PvP be such a disaster if not for the fact that it was so combat orientated?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think definitely WoW and MMOs and RPGs like Ultima kind of have they're sort of unique with this sort of system. But some other examples, right? Kevin, is Tarkov. Tarkov is not necessarily a world PvP game necessarily, let's say, but it shares a lot of similar elements, and definitely a lot of the similar sort of things come up of angst of being ganked while they're doing something, or there's sometimes players do that whole little shimmy thing where they're like, "Hey, dude, are you good? Don't kill me," or whatever. And other
The
players
wiggle's
won't kill
always
each
a
other.
lie. It's always a lie.
Yeah, right.
Don't believe the wiggle.
Yeah, and so there's a lot of depth and interesting things that even happen in Tarkov too, that are similar. But yeah, good question. Can you think of any others, Kevin?
Dark Souls is another great example, because people can invade your realm and things like that. So I like the PvP quite a bit in there. But one of the things that I would say is I think PvP is at its best when PvE is sprinkled in as well, if not the main objective. Like Tarkov is great at this because only the people who are kind of done with the game in terms of they've completed all their tasks and gotten all the gear they want and they're rich. They're the people that are like just looking for fights now. Most people are trying to do some kind of objective that's largely PvE, whether it's collect a bunch of stuff and escape or complete a certain task or whatever it is. And then the PvP is sort of incidental. And I think that creates for a really, really interesting and compelling and dynamic experience, adding to that sense of replayability. And also it allows for different skill sets to help you be successful. Like in a fighting game, like Street Fighter, it's like it's just you and the other guy, and you have a move set and he has a move set, right? There's no like there's no terrain, there's no line of sighting, there's no trying to get the NPCs to attack that guy instead of me, like, so it's going to come down to who's better at this game. But when you allow for all these other chaotic elements, then that's when things can, really open up in terms of how do I win this encounter? And that's really important for me as a boomer FPSer trying to be successful in a game like Tarkov that can't click heads as well as a lot of the youngsters out there, or my past self. So I think that's, but also just in terms of like any game, I think that the experience is really at its height when it mixes the two rather than just, straight up duel.
I wanted to throw in there that like kind of not the antithesis of, but an extraordinary challenge to games like that either like do either just PvP or just PvE or try to sprinkle it in is like a long-term power progression system. Like if you look at successful PvP games like League of Legends, there's a power progression system, but it's reset each game.
Right.
You look at a game like Tarkov, there's like minimal long-term PvE power progression, but then you look at a game like Diablo where someone who's geared could deal 50,000 times the damage of someone who is the same level but not geared, and that makes the game like hard to balance and hard to be fun and hard to make that into a good experience.
Right.
And that's always been one of WoW's issues, right? Is just that if you're in BFA and you joined at season, maybe BFA is not the best example, but Lich King or whatever expansion it is, if you join at the beginning of the game, you have a certain eye level, certain character power. But if you played out through the entire expansion and someone joins like, the last couple months of the expansion, well, their gear difference, power difference is so high. And so that turns into a bad player experience, like Candace is saying. So you got to solve all those sort of problems from the beginning if you're going to have a game like that.
Yeah,
and a lot of people sanitize the PvP. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And
a lot of people do the classic, like, I won't try ranked until I've mastered the game through the PvE campaigns or whatever it is. Like, I feel like I'm ready. And the same is true for like, I'm not interested in starting PvP until I have an unfair advantage that's in my favor to help me dominate before I really take part in this. And so, sort of mixing in, the whole time, I think can make for a better experience, but is really challenging to pull off.
Okay. It looks like that's the last of the questions, so we're going to call it for this episode. As always, thank you for being with us. Stick around in the Discord afterwards to ask questions, suggest more topics, and we will be back with you probably next Wednesday, same time.
Sounds great. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Cool. Later, gamers.